This is Sustainability Forward with Wrishi and Carmine.
Hello, Carmine. How are you?
Hey, Rishi. Good.
Carmine, the World Cup has started.
Yes.
And before we become very serious sustainability people and discuss the implications, I remember 3 years ago, we did an episode on the Paris Olympics, which we enjoyed doing and was also very well received.
Yes. And I like to join this kind of big sports event that happens in our life and what they mean in terms of sustainability.
That's right. But before we proceed, I have to ask Carmine, are you emotionally prepared for this World Cup?
So that's a very tricky question. As I'm an Italian, you know what's happening again this year. I love football. It gives you joy, drama, and sometimes both in the same match.
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in India, as you know. So football was not always the main sport in the country. Cricket was everywhere, though. But the World Cup, I remember growing up, was always a bit different. Even people who didn't usually follow club football suddenly had very strong views, particularly on teams like Brazil, Argentina, Italy, and even Germany.
Exactly. And this is probably the magic of what's happening when all people from a country come together and they forget their divisions for a month. And this is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest sport event. It's not only about football. It's memories, flags, it's family. It's watching a match with people who suddenly become technical expert, especially in Italy, after just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, this World Cup is actually, as you said, quite different in a very practical way. Of course, it is the biggest World Cup ever, 48 teams participating, 104 matches, 3 host countries, 16 host cities all across North America. So from a football point of view, that is really exciting. More countries, more fans, more stories to tell. But from a sustainability point of view, it does raise a very uncomfortable question. And that question is, can you make the world's biggest sporting event even bigger and still call it sustainable?
Yes. And try not to take out the magic out of it.
That's correct. Take something people are already talking about and ask whether it tells us or what it tells us about climate, energy, infrastructure, and business. And the World Cup is a perfect case study for that because it is emotional. It is also a huge machine. It moves fans, teams, broadcasters, sponsors, food, merchandise, construction, temporary infrastructure, and energy demand across a huge continent, such as North America in this case.
It is big, and that's what makes it also interesting. And talking about sustainability, yes, probably to our minds, we correlate to emissions coming from steel, cement, so construction, energy. People expect, therefore, a sustainability issue. But football feels innocent. It feels human. It feels joyful, as most of the sports.
Yes, until you remember that millions of people flying around North America also have a footprint.
Exactly. So today we are not saying don't watch the World Cup. So please keep doing, enjoy it, enjoy this time with your friends. But let's also ask, what does a truly sustainable World Cup look like in a warming world?
Yeah, and that's what kind of brings us to why this World Cup is a bit different from a sustainability standpoint. So let's first maybe start with the scale. This is the first men's World Cup with 48 teams. That is a big change. Those who are aware of World Cups will obviously know that. Emotionally, I like that, right? More countries are getting representation. You get stories from smaller football nations. Fans who may have never seen their country in a World Cup suddenly get to enjoy that moment.
That's the beautiful side. Football becomes more global, less exclusive, hopefully also connecting countries. And for many of these countries, simply qualifying is almost like winning a small World Cup or just being there.
Exactly. But there is always a trade-off involved. More teams means more matches. We have I think, gone from 64 matches in previous editions to 104 in 2026. And because the tournament is spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, you are not just adding matches, you're adding significant amount of distance as well.
This is the part that people probably outside North America sometimes underestimate. We say it's in America, as in America is one city, one region, but it's big, it's enormous.
It is. It is not, for example, like a trip from London to Manchester. This is potentially, a fan going from Mexico City to Vancouver, or Miami to Seattle, or Toronto to Los Angeles.
Rishi, this makes me think of one of our recent episodes when we talk about what is the person carbon footprint. If you remember, we discussed probably one of the main drivers is about transportation. And
Correct.
taking that train is not like eating a sandwich. The carbon footprint is much higher.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are flying, and that is indeed the core sustainability issue with, or at least one of the main sustainability issues with this World Cup. People often think that carbon footprint of a tournament is the stadium lights, the plastic cups, the waste that is generated, maybe, even the diesel generators. Those things do matter, but for a global mega event, the biggest footprint is usually travel.
Especially fan travel during this month.
Yes, and that matters a lot because it changes where we look for solutions. If 80% or more of the footprint is coming from people flying to and around the tournament, then a few visible sustainability measures inside the stadium are not enough. They may be good, they may be also necessary, but they are not the main story.
Yeah. So the first big point is the sustainability problem is not just inside the stadium. It is in the system around the stadium.
Yeah, the match is just 90 minutes. The footprint starts months before the ball is kicked off.
So, Rishi, let's talk about numbers. There are different estimates out there, and we should be careful because carbon accounting for a World Cup is not simple. If we try to make a list, we have the fan travel, team travel, accommodation, stadium operations, temporary infrastructure, food and drink, merchandise, broadcasting, waste, construction. I can go much longer with the list.
Yes, we can. And also, you have the question of where to draw the boundary. What do you include? Do you count only FIFA controlled emissions? Do you include all fan travel? Do you include hotel stays? Do you include new infrastructure, or do you include sponsor related emissions? This is where carbon accounting becomes partly technical and, of course, partly political.
Yeah, because it's a system, complex system. And as you said, Rishi, the answer depends on the boundaries.
Yeah, draw the boundary narrowly and the footprint looks smaller. And if you draw it very broadly, the footprint looks much larger. However, the research that we have done suggests that independent estimates for this World Cup suggest the emissions could be several million tons of CO2 equivalent, potentially the highest of any World Cup. Some estimates put it at around 7.8 million tons of CO2 equivalent. Others suggest around 9 million tons. So we should not pretend we exactly know the number today, but we can say the direction is clear. This is likely to be a very carbon intensive tournament, and the travel is the dominant driver.
And this is where it becomes conflicting because football is built on movement, fan travel, supporting. This is part of the culture. It's also around people meeting and peacefully and support their teams. You follow your team, you meet other fan, you take over a square, you sing badly or goodly, but so many things to consider.
That is true. And this is why the answer cannot simply be fans should not travel or fans should minimize travel. That will completely miss the point. The better question is, how do you design the tournament so that the joy of travel is not turned into unnecessary emissions?
So give me an example.
One example is regional clustering, right? If a team is playing in 3 group matches, keep those matches within a relatively tight region wherever possible. That reduces travel for teams and for fans. Or design fan routes more intelligently. If a team is likely to bring a large traveling fan base, don't send them from one side of the continent to the other if you can avoid it.
Yeah, and it's probably easier on the first part of the tournament before the elimination phase. So fixture design becomes climate design.
Correct. Tournament architecture is sustainability architecture. And this is a point that applies beyond sport. In business, we often try to green the operations after the business model has already been designed. But many emissions are locked in by design choices made much earlier. How do you locate assets? How do you move people? How many nodes are in the network? How much redundancy do you need? How do you balance cost, resilience, and emissions? World Cup is not so different from a supply chain in that sense.
That's a very sustainability forward way to describe football, Rishi.
Thank you. I think you're right.
But it's useful because people may look at the World Cup and see emotion. You look at it and see logistics, infrastructure, and system design.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So let's give credit where it is due. One of the positive things about the World Cup is that it uses many existing stadiums. That is better than building huge new venues that become empty afterwards.
Absolutely. From a sustainability perspective, reuse is usually better than new build. Concrete and steel carry significant embodied carbon, which we have discussed multiple times on this show. Mega events have a long history of building expensive venues that are underused after the event. The white elephant problem is real.
It is real also from an economics perspective. When you see this history of Olympic Games, SEMA World Cup, and you see what has been the ROI of this event, very rarely turn it positives. And I have some very recent memories also. What you say about white elephants, many discussion happened in the Winter Olympic Games that just finished a few months back in Italy.
Yes. In India, we are very familiar with big infrastructure that looks impressive at the opening ceremony. And then later, everyone quietly seems to ask, who is maintaining this?
Yeah. And I guess this is only India, as we said.
Yeah. Fair point. But 2026 does have an interesting trade-off. Using existing stadiums reduces the need for new construction. That is good. But because the venues are spread over such a large geography, the tournament creates a much bigger transport challenge. So you can reduce one category of emissions while increasing another.
This is an important sustainability lesson. A project can be better on one metric and worse on another.
Exactly. And that is why serious sustainability work has to be systems-based, as you pointed out earlier. It cannot be only a checklist. Existing stadiums, good. Huge travel footprint is a problem. A more inclusive tournament, of course, very good. More matches and more emissions, clearly a problem. We can, of course, relate to the economic boost for the host cities, which is potentially good. But this local disruption and affordability issues it creates in the communities, that's also a real problem.
It's very difficult to give an answer if the World Cup is good, is bad. The point is, it's very important to understand what are the questions to ask and what are the trade-offs and bring some clarity.
Yeah, and trade-offs are where serious sustainability lives.
Now, Richie, it's summer. Let's talk about it, because this is not only what about the World Cup impact, it's not about just this World Cup impact on the climate. It's also about climate change impacting the World Cup.
Indeed. The tournament is being played in June and July across North America. Some host cities can get seriously hot and humid at that time of the year. And this matters for players, fans, stadium workers, volunteers, security staff, transport workers, everyone around the event.
Yes. And I have some memories of the previous World Cup that happened in US. It was in 1994. I still remember how the players were suffering around that time. And football fans sometimes think players are machines, but in extreme heat, even elite athletes struggle.
They do. I was watching a match yesterday. The second half was clearly slower, even though both the teams were equally matched, but both teams seemed to slow down significantly. Heat of this magnitude affects hydration, recovery, decision making, increases the chance of injury, and it puts cardiovascular strain. It can also change the character of a match. Teams may press less, the tempo may drop. Players do want to conserve their energy, and in fact, in this World Cup, they have also introduced the concept of this hydration break, which is, I think, roughly 20-25 minutes into each half, there is a dedicated hydration break for both teams.
Yeah. So this climate risk can become really a sporting risk, human risk.
And even a fairness risk. If one team plays in hot and humid conditions and another plays in a cooler city or a covered stadium, that is part of the competitive environment.
Like altitude, but with heat and humidity.
Yeah. Now, there is also the question of El Nino. The careful framing is this. Climate change is the structural issue that we know. It raises the baseline temperature, of course. El Nino, when present, can add an additional warming effect and disrupt weather patterns. So if El Nino conditions are active during the tournament period, they may amplify the heat risk. But we should not say that El Nino is the main cause. Of course, it has been discussed in the recent days. The deeper driver is the long-term warming of the climate system.
So climate change loads the dice, and El Nino can make the throw worse.
That's an interesting way to put it. And the important metric here is not just the normal temperature we see on a weather app. Sports scientists often look at wet bulb globe temperature, or the WBGT as it is known commonly. It combines temperature, humidity, sunlight, and wind. Humidity is critical because the body cools itself through sweating. If the air is already humid, sweat does not evaporate as effectively, so the body struggles to cool down.
This is where it becomes very real. It's not climate graph. It is a player trying to recover after a sprint. It's a fan standing outside the stadium. It's a steward working for hours in the sun.
Yeah. Reuters reported on a study suggesting that roughly a quarter of matches could exceed FIFPro heat safety thresholds, with some reaching conditions where postponement may become recommended. Now, that does not mean all those matches will be unsafe. Weather varies, venues vary, scheduling matters, but it tells us the risk is serious enough to plan around.
So what does planning around mean?
Several things. Hydration breaks, as we discussed earlier, later kickoff times, more shaded areas, water access, more medical readiness, cooling centers, better communication with fans, protection for workers and staff, and possibly moving or delaying matches if conditions are dangerous.
So it's about acknowledge the risk, acknowledge the issue, and this is where the sport becomes climate adaptation.
And that is a big shift. We've, of course, talked about climate adaptation in multiple ways. We used to talk mainly about sports impact on the planet. Increasingly, we have also to talk about the planet's impact on sport. More heat, more storms, more wildfire smoke, more water stress. These will affect where sport is played, when it is played, and how safe it is to play.
So football is not separate from climate change, it is inside it.
And that may be one of the most powerful messages of this episode, that all these activities are within the envelope of climate change.
So let's come back to the stadium, Wrishi, because when people go to a match, the sustainability things, they're usually operational. So we see recycling bins, reusable caps, maybe vegetarian food, maybe public transportation signs.
And those things are useful, but they also are the most visible part of the footprint, not necessarily the largest part. Again, going back to one of our previous episodes, we know that very well. This is what I'd call the visible sustainability trap.
Help me to explain that.
Yeah. Organizations often focus their sustainability communications on things people can see: waste bins, LED lights, solar panels, reusable cups, water stations. All of that is good, very good, should be done, and more of that needs to be done. But the biggest impacts may be less visible, such as aviation, accommodation, concrete, grid emissions, supply chains, refrigeration, temporary power, and logistics.
So, what you're saying, Rishi, visible does not mean material.
Yeah. And for our listeners who work in business, that is a very important point. A sustainability strategy should focus on materiality, where the largest impacts are, rather than only visibility.
Yes, I agree. Still, visible action still matter. Do you
Yeah,
agree?
they do. They do matter for behavior, education, and operational performance. If you are at a stadium and you see good waste systems, water refill points, public transportation integration, that can influence behavior. But if those visible actions are used to distract the biggest impacts, then it becomes what we call greenwashing.
So the issue is not the recycling bin. The issue is when the recycling bin becomes the story.
Especially if the main story is millions of people flying.
Very painful for the recycling bin.
I have nothing against the recycling bin, Carmine.
Yeah, no, we are pro bin on this podcast.
Strongly pro bin, but we are also pro materiality.
Yes. So there is another small but interesting story, the pitch itself. Some North American stadiums usually use artificial turf, but for the World Cup, FIFA requires natural grass.
Yes, and this is a good example of sustainability trade-offs hiding inside sporting decisions. Natural grass is preferred for elite football. Many players like it. It is seen as better for the quality of play, but installing and maintaining natural grass in stadiums that were not originally designed for it can be complicated. You may need additional irrigation, lighting, drainage, cooling, and maintenance. In some stadiums, especially those designed for American football or multi-purpose events, the pitch conversation is a serious operational subject.
Yeah. So what we just see as a green rectangle, it is not. It's much more complex.
Yeah, it is infrastructure. It needs water, energy, labor, and resilience. And the alternatives are not perfect either. Artificial turf may use less water, but it can have issues with heat, player performance, injury concerns, of course, microplastics, and the end of life disposal as well.
So there is not a simple answer even here.
Yeah, there never is. And I think this is why the World Cup is such a useful sustainability case study. Almost every choice involves trade-offs. Natural grass may be better for the game, but it may require more resources. Existing stadiums reduce construction, but geography increases travel. More teams improve inclusion, but more matches increase emissions. Summer scheduling works commercially, but heat risks also tend to increase.
This is, I guess, lessons from the real world. It's a trade-off management.
Yeah. And the question is whether those trade-offs are acknowledged honestly and managed transparently.
So we have to ask then the uncomfortable question. When FIFA talks about sustainability, should we believe in it?
I would not answer that with a simple yes or no. FIFA does have a sustainability and human rights strategy for this World Cup. It covers multiple areas like environmental protection, human rights, accessibility, waste, procurement, emission measurement, and governance. Each host city also has environmental and human rights planning. That is important. We should not pretend sustainability is absent.
I feel a but here.
There is. Yeah, but the credibility test is whether sustainability influences the biggest decisions. How many matches? How far apart are the host cities? Are teams and fans clustered regionally? Are kickoff times designed around heat risk? Is fan travel treated as a central to the footprint? Will actual emissions be reported transparently after the tournament? Are offsets used for residual emissions, or they are used to make high emission model look more acceptable?
So the question, Rishi, is not whether FIFA has a sustainability document.
Exactly. The question indeed is whether sustainability has power in the decision making.
This is a good distinction.
And as we know, it applies to companies too. Many companies have sustainability targets. The real question is whether those strategies influence capital allocation, product design, supply chains, pricing, and governance. If sustainability sits in a report but not in the operating model, it has limited impact.
And we discuss so many times in the podcast, it's about risk management, it's about helping leadership making the right choices with courage. So for FIFA, the equivalent is, does sustainability sit in the tournament design or only in the tournament brochure?
Exactly.
Okay, this is sharp.
Thank you. I will pretend I came up with spontaneously.
Let's talk about the offsets, because they always appear in this conversation.
Yes, offsets are complicated. In principle, compensating for residual emissions can be part of a climate strategy, and it is recommended in many cases. But it should come after avoidance and reduction. The basic hierarchy should be avoid emissions first, reduce what you cannot avoid, substitute where possible, and only then compensate for residual emissions.
So offset should not be the first move.
Yeah, if you design a high emissions event and then say, don't worry, we'll offset it, people will rightly be skeptical. The credibility problem becomes even bigger if emissions accounting is not transparent, if the offset quality is unclear, or if the event is expanding in ways that structurally increases emissions.
And what about sponsorship?
Sponsorship is also part of the credibility question. Global sport events depend on sponsors, and sponsors want visibility. But when high emissions sectors sponsor events that promote sustainability, people ask whether the event is enabling genuine transition or providing reputational cover. When you look at one of the matches, you can clearly see some of those names.
This is where football becomes business.
Yeah, the World Cup is not only a sporting event. In fact, it's probably more a bigger commercial event. It's a huge commercial platform, sponsorship, broadcasting, tourism, hospitality, merchandise. All of these are part of the model. So if FIFA wants to become credible on climate, it has to think about the entire commercial ecosystem.
And again, this is not unique to football.
Not at all. Museums, conferences, universities, music festivals, banks, airlines, energy companies, everyone faces this question. Who funds the platform? What does funding signal? And is the sustainability claim credible in context?
We should also talk about the social side, because sustainability is not only carbon.
Of course, sustainability includes access, affordability, labor, safety, inclusion, and legacy. World Cup should not become only a premium entertainment product. Football's power comes from mass participation and emotional access. It belongs to the people.
We are coming back to the beginning of the episode, talking about emotion. I second that.
Thank you. But if the ticket prices, for example, are too high, accommodation becomes unaffordable, local residents are disrupted, and the benefits mainly go to sponsors and hospitality packages, then that becomes a social sustainability problem.
And the host cities have real responsibility. Transportation, policing, waste, fan zones, crowd control, emergency services, local businesses, public spaces.
Yeah, and often public money or public capacity is involved, even when the event is commercially profitable. So the question for every host city should be, what remains after that final whistle?
Better transportation, better accessibility, better community football facilities, better public spaces, or better WOS systems.
Yes, or just temporary branding, inflated hotel prices, and a cleanup bill that comes later.
So legacy is a word that gets used a lot in these kind of mega events.
Too much, probably.
Yeah, but still important.
Very important. The problem is not the word legacy. The problem is when legacy becomes vague. A credible legacy should be specific. For example, what infrastructure remains, who benefits from it, how is it funded, how will it be maintained, how will we measure in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, how all this can be estimated.
So a sustainable World Cup should leave capabilities, not just memories.
Exactly. Another line that is worth keeping.
So let's be constructive. If we were designing a more sustainable World Cup, what should we do?
First, regional clustering. We've seen that in many other tournaments. We see that in Olympics and other mega events. Keep teams and fans within tighter regions during the group stage wherever possible. That reduces travel, improves recovery, lowers emissions, and may even improve fan experience.
Good. Second,
transparent carbon budgeting. Before the tournament, publish the expected footprint, the boundaries, the assumptions, and the reduction plan. After the tournament, publish the actual data.
So that sounds basic. If you cannot measure, you cannot control. Powerful.
Yes, very powerful. Transparency creates accountability. The third one I would add is travel demand management. Make lower carbon options easier. Public transportation bundles are very valuable. Fan shuttles, intercity coach and rail where available. Clear information. Don't make fans solve the system alone.
Because the fans usually choose the easiest option, not the perfect one.
Yeah. Design the easy option to be better. Fourth, heat-aware scheduling. Match timing should consider player welfare, fan safety, and worker protection, not only broadcast value.
This one may become more important for every World Cup.
I think so, Carmine. That's probably going to be true for every major sporting or other event. Fifth, reuse infrastructure, but connect it to transport planning. Existing stadiums are good, but only if mobility system works. There's a sixth point around credible legacy. Every host city should have a clear answer to what is better for local people after the tournament.
So the list is becoming long. So what's next?
There is a final seventh one, and that is governance. Sustainability needs a seat at the table when the biggest decisions are made, not after the host cities are chosen, not after the schedule is fixed, and certainly not after the commercial model is locked in. It should be at the very beginning.
So sustainability cannot be the cleanup team. It has to be in the design team.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's see bring down now to the fun level, because someone listening may say, okay, but I'm just watching the World Cup. What I'm supposed to do?
First of all, enjoy. But Carmine, your question is also very fair. And I don't think the answer should be guilt. Fans can make better choices where practical, use public transportation to the stadium, avoid unnecessary short flights if alternatives exist, reduce waste, choose lower impact food where possible, stay longer rather than taking multiple trips, support local businesses, and be mindful of heat and safety. But the bigger responsibility sits with the institutions, FIFA, host cities, sponsors, broadcasters, and transport providers.
So personal choices matter, but the system design matters more.
Yes, and that is a line we've maintained on this podcast, right? Personal choices matter. And that is a theme we could keep coming back to. Individual behavior matters, but it is shaped by infrastructure, incentives, and options. If the only realistic way to follow your team is flying thousands of kilometers, then the system has already made the decision for you.
Yeah, and that's true in energy too. People say just better, but sometimes the better choice is not available, affordable or convenient.
Yeah, so for fans, enjoy the tournament, make sensible choices where you can, and ask better questions of the organizations running these events.
This is fair. No guilt, but no denial.
Exactly.
So, this episode is about football, but it's also about something much bigger.
Yeah, the World Cup is a mirror for many sectors. Every sector faces the same question. How do you grow without simply expanding your footprint? Tourism faces it, aviation faces it, data centers face it, as we discussed recently. Conferences face it, cities face it, and consumer brands face it too.
And the trade-offs are very similar.
They are. We want inclusion, but inclusion can mean more travel. We want global reach, but global reach can mean more emissions. We need world-class infrastructure, but infrastructure uses resources. We want summer events to enjoy, but summers are getting hotter. Of course, we want commercial growth, but growth can clash with access and affordability.
And no one of those tensions are easy to solve.
No, they are not. But serious sustainability does not avoid tension. It makes the tension visible and manages it. That is why the World Cup is such a powerful case study. It is emotional enough for everyone to care and complex enough to reveal the real issues.
Maybe this is the opportunity. If football can talk honestly about climate, more people may understand it.
Yes, fans may not read a technical report on climate adaptation, but they will notice if matches need cooling breaks. They will notice if fans are warned about heat. They will notice if travel becomes too expensive or too exhausting. They will notice if stadiums are empty or communities are disrupted.
Football makes climate visible.
And that is why FIFA has a huge responsibility. The World Cup is not just watched by sustainability professionals, of course, it is watched by everyone.
Good, Rishi. So let's bring this episode toward the conclusion. Where do we land? Because I still want to watch and enjoy the World Cup.
They should, of course, and we should as well. The World Cup is one of the few events that genuinely feels global. It creates joy, it creates argument, heartbreak, identity, and memory. This episode is not about guilt. It is about the maturity to have a sensible conversation.
That's good. Good word.
The World Cup has grown commercially. It has grown globally. It now also has to grow environmentally.
Football cannot say it belongs to the world and then ignore what's happening to the world.
And for me, that is the real story of 2026. Can the world's game adapt to a warming world? Can it reduce its own footprint while protecting players, fans, host cities from climate risk? Can it be inclusive without simply becoming bigger, more expensive, and carbon intensive?
And can it still remain football? Emotional, chaotic, beautiful, painful?
Preferably with fewer penalties against the teams I support.
Depends on your team. But so enjoy the World Cup, Rishi. Watch the matches, argue with your friend, celebrate the goals.
But also look at what is happening around the pitch, the flights, the heat, the infrastructure, host cities, the legacy. Because the future of sport will not only be decided by what happens on the field.
It will also be decided by whether the field itself remains playable.
Yes. And that is it for today's episode of Sustainability Forward. If this made you think differently about the World Cup, share it with someone who loves football or someone who pretends to love football every 4 years, including me.
Which is all for the planet.
Exactly. See you next time, Carmine.
Thank you, Rishi.
You've been listening to Sustainability Forward. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, share, and subscribe. You can find us at sustainabilityforward.com, on all major podcast platforms, and on LinkedIn under Sustainability Forward, the podcast.